The crossovers continue. One superstar returns while another disappears, and someone said his name. All this and so much more on an absolutely stacked episode of NXT. Let's dive in and get right to it. This is About Last Night on Rumble Rewind. Well, hey everybody, thanks for swinging by the Rumble Rewind channel today. Before we get started talking about this week's NXT top 3 moments, stories, and developments, do me a quick favor, scroll down below this video, hit that like button because I know you're going to love this content. While you're there, go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and turn on your post notifications so you never miss an upload. If you know somebody that you think would enjoy the content that we produce here at Rumble Rewind, share this video with them and help us grow our channel. We are on our way to our first goal of 200 subscribers. Once we get there, we're going to be doing a giveaway of some CM Punk merch, and I want you to be eligible for that, so make sure that you hit that subscribe button for me. All right, let's jump right into today's episode. Now, this one's going to be a little bit different because so many of this episode's stories kind of cross over and intertwine, and most of those connections stem from the show opener. So while the opener and the resulting match from the opener is actually my top moment of the night, I feel like we at least have to jump in and explore a little bit of it before we can go on. So let's start right there. Ethan Page would make his entrance flanked by personal security, and this would be his first appearance as the NXT champion. He would cut a promo about how the locker room doesn't like him, other superstars don't like him, even the fans don't like him, and yet here he was setting records as the fastest person to win the NXT championship at only 40 days. Now, the crowd was hot for this promo. They were booing him the whole time, and Ethan Page was unfazed. It's actually really well done. He's very good, very focused, undistracted, and did a great job of playing into that, but not getting distracted or derailed by it. Now, at one point, Oro Mensah would try to attack him, and for once in their WWE careers, the security team actually prevents an attack from happening. Ethan Page would even talk that up and say, wow, security actually did their job. Now, later in his promo, one by one, the other competitors from NXT's Fatal 4-Way match would make their entrance and begin to cut a promo. Obviously, this would break down into a brawl, and later we would find out that the main event for the evening was going to be a tag match in which Ethan Page and Shawn Spears would be taking on Trick Williams and Javon Evans. Now, that resulting match will end up being our main event of the evening and would produce what is my number 1 moment. So we'll get back to that, but let's look at the others first. My number 3 moment of the night has to surround Chase U and the developing story there. Early in the night, we would see Ridge Holland come in to try and cheer up Andre Chase and Duke Hudson after their Heatwave loss, said that they absolutely stole the show, that their match was incredible, and they will definitely get a rematch down the road that they deserve. Ridge said that he got Thea a match with Izzy Dame and said that he believes that Thea is ready to take another shot at the NXT Women's Championship. He said that this match with Izzy would go a long way in proving that to General Manager Ava. He also said that he got Duke a title match as well. Duke gets excited thinking he's taking on Ethan Page, but turns out he's going to be facing Obafemi next week for the North American Championship. Immediately, Duke's countenance kind of changes, and Riley Osborne says that Femi's going to kill Duke next week. Ridge talks him up, and the guys, they all get excited about it, especially Thea, who says that Duke could win this thing and bring singles gold to Chase U for the first time. Now, later in the night, we would see this match between Thea Hale and Izzy Dame, and it was kind of short-lived, as Tatum Paxley would emerge from her secret hideout behind the barricade just to watch. Izzy, though, would get distracted. She would attack Tatum, and in the process, run herself into the ring post. Thea would capitalize on this distraction. She'd hit some of her signature offense in the ring, and ultimately in this match with the Kimura and Izzy Dame tapping out. After the match, Obafemi came to the Crow's Nest and cut a promo saying that he was going to destroy Duke Hudson next week. Hudson would then turn around and cut his own promo, which was very fiery, very well done, and he would end that by saying that next week he was going to give Obafemi one of the biggest Andre Chase University whoopings of all time. So I'm looking forward to that match next week. I do kind of still think that Obafemi is going to murder Duke Hudson. It's just kind of how it's going to happen. Now, later in the night, NXT Anonymous would catch up with Tatum Paxley backstage and she was talking to a doll about how championships were still her goal, but she would have to deal with girls like Izzy who often take her dolls away. She got frustrated in this moment, ripped the head off the doll, and threw it on the ground as she walked away. After she left, though, we would see someone pick up the doll, and that someone would turn out to be Wendy Choo. So, like I said on my recap last week, this team up, this collaboration between Wendy Choo and Tatum Paxley has been teased a couple of times, as has a potential feud between Izzy and Tatum. So, Tatum versus Izzy feud, yes please. Tatum and Wendy tag team, yes please. Let's see this stuff happen. But anyway, there's a lot going on with Chase U. Like I said earlier, all these stories are intertwined, interwoven together, as that's what I mean by that. This is the kind of storytelling that WWE's been doing lately, where everything affects something else. And I gotta say, I love it. But sticking with Chase U and just talking about them for a minute, every time I think I know where this story is gonna go, they kind of swerve me a little bit. I thought we were gonna get a very frustrated Chase U in this episode of NXT. I thought we were going to begin to see some dissension around the decision not to bring Ridge to Heatwave, but instead Ridge steps in and he kind of like provides a boost to Chase U. Now, I don't think that storyline with the frustration and the questions surrounding Ridge is off the table. I do think that that's still going to go somewhere, but this is not what I expected in a good way. I want to see this story continue to develop. I'm really liking it. It's really interesting. And because of all the swerves, it keeps me interested each and every week, and it keeps me guessing, which is fun. I do think, though, that if Thea faces Roxanne Perez, I don't expect Thea to win the championship. I don't think it's time for that yet. Not that Thea's not ready, not that she can't handle it. I think she could carry it well for a limited time with her current character. But I just don't think the Roxanne story is anywhere close to done yet. I think Roxanne's going to have that belt for quite a while until we see either the return of Cora Jade and that feud take place, or until we see the debut of Julia and maybe that feud takes it off of her. But again, I just don't think that Roxanne's story is done yet. Thus, I don't think that Thea is going to take the belt off of her. Also, despite Duke's confidence, I still think Obafemi's walking out of next week with the North American Championship, and I think he's going to do it in a dominant fashion. But tell me your thoughts on Chase U and all these stories that are interlocked and interwoven together. How do you see them playing out? And do you think that Duke Hudson has a shot next week? All right, let's move on to my number 2 moment of the night, and that surrounds Brooks Jensen. Now, if you've been following the story of Brooks Jensen for a while, you know that most of this development, this storyline, has happened off of TV, on social media, on outlets like X and Instagram. Very few moments have been captured in the arena. There have been moments, but to sell the storyline, they've tried to keep them off camera and just allow them to take place on the fringes. Last week on NXT, it was announced that Brooks was invited to have a sit-down conversation with Ava to discuss his future. We would see that conversation play out tonight in a very basic segment where she said they were willing to give him another chance if he would keep it together and turn this whole thing around. Brooks talked about the pressures of being a second-generation wrestler, of all the expectations that come with that, and he promised that he would turn it around and he would make it right. He owned his actions, he apologized, and said that he was here to make an impact. Now, very shortly after this conversation, Brooks Jensen would attack Javon Evans backstage, taking him out of the main event. Josh Briggs would show up to break it up, saying that he was one of the ones that vouched for Jensen and told him to knock it off and leave. Jensen said that he was just trying to make an impact on his first night back. Now, later in the evening, both men were in Ava's office along with Robert Stone and Stevie Turner. Ava said that Jensen is going to have to face Javon Evans next week if he is medically cleared. With that, Jensen would leave the office, and Briggs said that he was willing to step in and help deal with the Brooks Jensen problem, but he wanted Shawn Spears in the ring after Shawn cost him a month of his career. Ava said she would make it happen, but Briggs had to stay out of the main event. Now, after Briggs agreed, he left, and that's when Stevie turned around to suggest him as Trick's partner for the main event. Robert Stone then turned around and said, "I can't believe you didn't say his name." Now, later in the evening, we would see Brooks talking to somebody in a different office, but we couldn't see who it was. My best guess, though, is it is Shawn Spears, because as the night would develop, Shawn Spears was cutting a promo when he said he had to leave to check on a lost soul, assuming that lost soul is Brooks Jensen. But we'll have to see where all of this goes. Again, just like with the Chase U story, a lot of stories are interwoven here, intertwined, and it's really hard to separate out any one. Now, there's been a lot of really interesting build that took place around Brooks Jensen, and if I'm being honest, at first this felt a bit flat and super basic. The sit-down conversation with Ava was really well done and it was really well delivered, but after everything that's happened with Jensen over the last couple of weeks, to me it just didn't feel like quite enough. I feel like there was more that could be done or should be done as a result of his actions. Now, his story thankfully did pick up through the night, which was good, and it was good enough to A, get it on this list, and then B, keep me interested for where it goes in the future. Now, I do see him at some point aligning with Shawn Spears, and perhaps there's a group that forms of younger, directionless superstars kind of gravitating towards Spears for help. But I think that could lead to a feud with Josh Briggs, which I think would be great. It'd be good to see their story play out in that way. I do think that this story has a lot of potential moving forward, and I'm really hoping to see it start to take shape over the next couple of weeks and really pick up to the level that I feel like would be worthy of all the hype and all the buildup that was around it. But tell me your thoughts on Brooks Jensen and his return to NXT. What did you think of this segment tonight? Do you think it was enough for all the buildup that's been around it? Now, before we jump back into our top story of the evening, obviously the main event tag match, let's talk about a couple other notable things that happened on this episode. We would see Carmen Petrovic take on Ariana Grace in a match that was set up out of their tag team match on Heatwave. Now, Jacy Jayne and Jasmine Nix would come to ringside to watch. Petrovic would get the win, but after the match, Fallon Henley would actually attack Carmen Petrovic. She told Jacy Jayne she's tired of these rookies and it was time for them to do something about it. Now later, Fallon would cut an additional promo talking about Sol Ruca. Fallon said it should have been her, Fallon, that got the shot against Kalani Jordan because she wouldn't have wasted it like Sol did. This would end up resulting in a match between the two of them, and during the match, Sol would hit Fallon with the Soul Snatcher, looking like she was going to pick up the win, but then the run-in happened. She was attacked by Jacy Jayne and Jasmine Nix, and then the trio left the ring together. So I'm still curious as to where this storyline goes. What are we going to see here? It does look like there's a group forming, and you know, I'm looking forward to it. I think the three of them will work really well together. Also on the card tonight, we saw Tony D taking on Lexis King for the Heritage Cup. Eddie Thorpe was guest DJ, I guess, during the match from the Crow's Nest. And I think it's interesting because we're actually seeing a feud develop between Lexis King and Eddie Thorpe over their taste in music. Now in the match, Tony D would get the win 2-1, and it would end with Eddie Thorpe playing an EDM version of Tony D's theme song. Now, I don't know if you've been a fan of wrestling for a long time and watched WCW back in the day, but there was a period of time where Jeff Jarrett and a stable of a couple other guys were feuding with Conan and kind of his group because Jeff Jarrett's group hated rap music. That was the whole basis for this feud. It was the whole basis for why they were mortal enemies, was rap music versus country music. I didn't think we'd ever see that again, but apparently here we are. We're feuding over, you know, yacht rock versus EDM. Okay, cool. Also on the card, we saw OTM get their tag team match versus the OC. This match was also set up last week after the OC attacked OTM backstage. OTM would walk through the backstage area, kind of cutting a promo on their way to gorilla position, and this would transition seamlessly into their entrance. I love these kind of follow shots with the camera, the single shot of cutting a promo into the entrance. I think they're really well done, and I love them every time they happen. This was no exception. OTM's promo here was great. As far as the match itself goes, Michin would appear from the crowd and begin to brawl with Jada Parker. In all the confusion, OTM would hit their finisher and pick up the surprise win over the OC. So good to see OTM getting built up. This story with the OC continues, and we'll see where it goes from here. In another tag match, we would see Tyson and Tyreek taking on Gallus, and in this one, Gallus got the win in a relatively short match. Still not much to talk about with this story. We'll see where it goes from here. All right, let's take a second to talk about Wesley. At the end of Heatwave, he said he would address his future in NXT tonight on the episode. He came to the ring talking about not knowing what he was going to do from here. He said that he can't challenge for the North American Championship anymore, and without that championship, he doesn't really know what to do. Wes begins to act as if he's going to say he's leaving NXT when all of a sudden MSK's theme music hits, bringing Zach Wentz and Trey Miguel from TNA to the ring. They would convince Wes not to quit, saying that MSK and the Rascals have things to do on NXT. Later in the night, the three would encounter Gallus backstage, and after a brief verbal back and forth altercation, a 6-man tag match was announced for next week, so we'll see where that goes as well. Earlier in the week, Damon Kemp announced via his social media that he was no longer under contract with the WWE, which means, of course, the No Quarter Catch crew had to deal with him, Tony D style, by taking him for a short ride in the trunk of their car. I guess this is how they're writing Damon Kemp off of TV. I get it. Charlie Dempsey is really trying to be Tony D, so it makes sense that he would do something like this. Now, at the time of this scene, Ren Sinclair was in the most dangerous place on earth, the NXT parking lot, but she swears that she saw nothing, and so really wonder if this is a one-off comedy moment for her or if it'll actually go somewhere. Ren hasn't really done much since her NXT debut. She's kind of been floundering, just floating around on the outskirts of the roster, and maybe the No Quarter Catch crew uses this to convince her to join them out of fear because of what she did or did not see. I could see that being a story that could be told. It could be helpful for Ren to help her develop some of her character, develop some on-screen personality. So we'll have to see where it goes, but I am hoping that it leads to something. All right, last little detail here. It does look like Cedric Alexander and Ashante the Adonis are headed to NXT, as Stevie Turner apparently signed Cedric Alexander and Robert Stone brought in Ashante the Adonis for the same purpose. This is just the latest game of one-upsmanship between Stevie Turner and Robert Stone in the contest to see who is the greatest assistant to the NXT general manager. I like this, though. I'm glad to see these guys coming to NXT. I'm glad to see Cedric and Ashante getting an opportunity because they haven't been on TV on the main roster in quite some time. When the two came together to form their tag team, there were vignettes, there were video packages. It looked like they were going to do something with them, and they never actually wrestled. I think they wrestled individually on main event a time or two. They've probably wrestled at some live events. They haven't been on TV in a match as a tag team at all. And so it's good to see them come to NXT. Hopefully they can develop some character that will connect with the fans and will allow them to make it back to the main roster and make somewhat of an impact. All right, number one moment of the night, like I said, was the main event, the tag team match that was supposed to be Trick Williams and Javon Evans versus Ethan Page and Shawn Spears. Now, like I said, Javon was taken out earlier in the night by Brooks Jensen, and Trick would need to find a tag team partner. Later in the night, Trick Williams would tell Kelly Kincaid that he needed to find another partner as he felt it would not be wise for him to go into this match 2-on-1. At the end of that segment, Joe Hendry's meme would pop up on the monitor behind them. Guess there's no secrets as to who Trick's partner will end up being. Now, a little later in the evening, Ethan Page and Shawn Spears were speaking with Sarah Schreiber. They called Trick a loser and said that he had no friends, and so that they were looking forward to their handicap match because no one was going to team with Trick. This match would, like I said, be the main event, and it would end up being Ethan Page and Shawn Spears taking on the team of Trick Williams and Joe Hendry. Late in the match, Oro Mensah would attack Ethan Page again, but Page would run out of the arena to escape through the crowd, leaving Spears alone against the faces. The face team would work over Spears for a while, and both men would hit their signature offense and their finishers, ultimately ending with Joe Hendry picking up the pinfall victory over Shawn Spears. The show would close with Vic Joseph asking if Joe Hendry had emerged as a potential challenger for the NXT Championship. Now, for me, like I said, this was the match of the night. It did advance several of the stories, which is what I'm looking for in a good match. It helped push some of those things forward. And if you're into the TNA crossovers, then it was a huge win to see Joe Hendry get to compete in a full match instead of being in a battle royal for 10 seconds. But tell me your thoughts on the match overall. How did you feel about it? Do you think that Joe Hendry should challenge for the NXT Championship? Now, let's talk about the show overall. To me, this was a good episode of NXT, and it was a good follow-up to Heatwave, but it wasn't great. I think that not having Roxanne on the show at all seemed like a big miss to me. Also, I'm just going to say it right now. I don't love all of the TNA crossovers. I like that the Rascals have given Wesley something to do away from the North American Championship. I think he needed that. I think he needs more direction. And I'm even okay with Joe Hendry coming in and tagging with Trick. The problem for me is that these crossovers seem to be taking a lot of focus away from NXT and the NXT talent. As I look even at the main event, which again was a great match, and if you take it alone, take it in a vacuum away from all the other storylines, it was really, really good and really, really fun. However, as I look at that match, why would Trick Williams, from a storyline perspective, choose to team up with Joe Hendry instead of any of the other obvious people that would have jumped at the chance to be in that match? There's two names on that list that really pop up for me. First is Josh Briggs. If he had asked Josh Briggs to team with him, Briggs would have said absolutely 100% because he wants to get his hands on Shawn Spears. Now, I know that Ava said he had to stay out of the main event, but I think if he were an actual competitor in the main event, that would have been a different story. She was telling him not to interfere, not to be part of it. Even Stevie Turner said, what about Josh Briggs? And that makes a lot of sense. He would want to be in that match. Why pass him up for somebody else? The other obvious option is Oro Mensah, who would have jumped at the chance to be in the match. Even if you think about the rivalry or the feud that was forming between Trick and the Metaphor, Oro Mensah would still jump into that match, would still want to be in there so that he could get his hands on Ethan Page. Either of those guys make total sense to team with Trick from a storyline perspective. So when you look at this match, the only reason that Trick would team up with Joe Hendry is outside of storyline, is business purposes to get Joe Hendry on the show. Again, I don't hate it. It just doesn't make sense from a story perspective, and it kind of makes it seem like the story is secondary to the business at hand, which is true, but is not how it should be played out on TV. So for me, I just don't love it. I think it took away from a lot of opportunity to really push some story forward. I know they're trying to slow burn these feuds. The Oro Mensah Ethan Page feud, they're trying to slow burn and take their time on. I get it. I'm for it. But that's why you put them in a tag match. It could break down into a brawl, could end up in a double disqualification, setting up future matches. There's so many things that could be done to continue that story at the pace at which they want to go while still having it make sense. Make it make sense. So for all of those purposes, all of that, I'm just not a big fan of the TNA crossovers. I was hoping that they would be rare and that they would be special, but now I feel like they're just expected and they're feeling kind of forced. When Jordynne Grace first came to challenge Roxanne Perez, I thought it was cool. I thought it was a fun thing that WWE was doing, and I said it at that point that I wanted them to be rare and special, but now I feel like they're expected and forced, which just kind of takes away from the whole product. So as much as I love NXT and as much as I love watching the show each week, I've got to give this episode overall a 6.75 out of 10. There's several reasons for that. One, it just didn't really hit for me. And two, I don't watch TNA, so I'm not a huge fan. I just don't know about Jordynne Grace, about Joe Hendry, about the Rascals. I didn't even watch NXT at the time when MSK was a thing. So outside of the story of, hey, we just convinced Wesley to stay and gave him something to do, that I agree with. But a lot of these TNA crossover moments are just feeling so forced, and it's taken away from the rest of the show for me. So 6.75 out of 10. Tell me what you thought. What would you rate this show? I will say this, though. There were some highlights, such as Ethan Page's opening promo. I thought he did a really, really good job with that. I mean, the fans booing him and him staying focused the whole time. The promo was really well done. The Chase U developments, I enjoyed those. I enjoy seeing where this story is going. I think the pacing of that story is really, really good, and it leaves us each week with questions as to what is going to happen next. And then the developments around Tatum Paxley, Wendy Chu, and the group of Jasmine Nix, JC Jane, Fallon Henley, I thought those were kind of highlights as well. Those stories continued forward. But outside of that, it seemed to me that all we got was a lot of great potential that was sacrificed in favor of some TNA spots. And so I didn't love this one. But again, tell me what you think. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And tell me, am I wrong about this TNA thing? Are you liking this crossover? Let me know in the comments. How would you rate this episode? And what do you think of all the TNA crossover? All right, that is it for today. Thanks for hanging out with me for a bit on Rumble Rewind. Before you go, make sure you scroll down below this video, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, share this video with somebody that you know that you think would love this content or would love to just rant on why they don't like the TNA crossovers as well. Now, a lot of tonight was follow-up from Heatwave, which was truly one of the best PLEs of the year. If you missed it, check out this video right here. I'd love to tell you all about it. Hey, thanks again for hanging out with me for a bit on Rumble Rewind. We'll see you next time.